Hello, and thanks for joining us today on today's webinar on using software as an alternative to human note takers at college. I'm Dave Tucker, and I'm a director at Sonocent, and we're very fortunate to be joined today by Darren McCarthy, who is a member of staff at University of Nevada, Reno. And Darren will be introducing himself later when we get to having a discussion with him. Just a few pieces of housekeeping before we begin. So just to let you know that on the control dashboard, there is the ability to ask questions. So if at any point during the webinar you do have a question, please type it into that box. And we have a member of staff who will collate those questions, and it could be something that we address during the webinar, or he will respond during the webinar in the chat pane. So please do utilize that feature. So just to give you an overview of what we'll be discussing today, after a brief introduction, I'm going to be talking about why is note-taking such a big deal, and why is it something that we should actually be trying to address. I'll then go through and talk about Sonocent's unique approach to solving this problem and why it works, and then we'll get a chance to talk with Darren about what he did at the University of Nevada, Reno. And a lot of the work that Darren's been doing there is really exciting, and he has been taking quite a methodical approach to how to implement the software and has seen exceptional results through doing that. So it's going to be really interesting to talk to Darren and see exactly what he did. And then I'll demonstrate the software, and then we'll have a further discussion, and at the end we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So what is Sonocent Audio Note Taker? So Sonocent is a company founded by Roger Tucker, who's my father, and his background is speech recognition and speech processing. And he saw a problem with the way that people in the UK accommodate for note-taking for students with disabilities, and he sought to solve that problem. And that was back in 2007. And since then, we have over 100,000 users, the majority of whom do have a disability. And we've picked up a couple of awards along the way. And we like to think of ourselves as friendly, passionate people who actually really do care about what we do. And on top of that, we're tea fanatics. So we have huge bags of tea in the office, and you may have noticed that we talk about tea a bit too much. So the goal of the software is not really to do anything for the student. And I know with other tools designed to help students with disabilities, part of the way it helps them is by doing jobs for them. And that's not really the way that Sonocent works. I describe Sonocent as a tool that enables students to do things themselves. And this is a nice illustration which encapsulates that. And because it enables students to do things themselves, it does enable them to be independent for the vast majority of abilities. So before I talk about the tool, I'd like to discuss the importance of note-taking and really take it back to basics and get us to think about what is note-taking and why do people struggle with it? Why are there issues? And note-taking is primarily serves two purposes. Number one, it's to capture information. So if you're sat in class listening to a teacher or professor talk, studies show that you're going to forget a huge amount of that information within a week, as much as 40% within 24 hours of the information you remember when you come out the lecture theatre. So unless you can capture that, there's no way that you could possibly review it in order to aid your memory. So you're note-taking because you want to capture the information to review later. But that's not the only reason you take notes. The other reason is that the process of taking notes is part of the process of how you synthesize information. And synthesizing information is basically relating the new information to information you already know. It's processing the information and thinking about it and considering where it fits under the information structures and knowledge that you already have. And actually the process of thinking about information, summarizing it, that's cutting it down, condensing it, outlining it, is a key way that we synthesize information, and that aids knowledge acquisition as well as retention. So for these two reasons, note-taking is one of the most important study skills at college today, and studies show this. Multiple studies have shown that good notes are directly correlated to good grades. And for this reason, to enable a student to take notes themselves is going to have a huge impact on their academic achievement, especially at college. But there's many reasons why someone may struggle with note-taking. Not to put labels on any of these, but if you have an issue with your working memory or your short-term memory, then it's going to be much harder to go through that process of summarizing information in real time whilst you're in class. When you're note-taking in class, you're having to concentrate for a long period of time. You're often hearing this information for the first time. You have to hold what the teacher says in your working memory, decide what's important, what you need to make note of, summarize it, and then write it down all simultaneously. It's actually a highly cognitively taxing process, more so than even playing chess. So if you have issues with your memory, then it's going to be very difficult for you to take good notes. Same for concentration. For some reason, our classes are really, really long, and concentrating through them, especially straight after lunch, is difficult at the best of times. But concentration or lack thereof can have huge impact on the ability to take notes. Sequential ordering problems, which is something you find often with students with dyslexia or dyspraxia. Just the information coming in, sometimes it's hard to remember the sequence in order to be able to take those notes. And then spelling, handwriting, motor skills, all of these can impact a student's ability to take good notes. But there is a simple solution to solve these, and that's audio recordings. If you can record the class, then you solve the capture issue. You're capturing all the information. You don't need to worry about that. You still have the synthesizing of information to do, but at least you could do that in your own time. You can do it afterwards. And actually using audio recordings can solve a lot of these barriers. Memory, because you're capturing it and you can refer back to any part, then it solves the memory issue. Concentration, it doesn't matter if you don't concentrate for the whole time. You can always come back to different parts later. Sequential ordering problems, you can very easily re-listen to the order and remind yourself of that. Spelling, well, you're not capturing the information by writing it, so spelling doesn't matter. And so on and so forth. You can see how the use of audio recordings can really help solve a lot of these issues with note-taking in real time in class. However, this is what a lot of the interfaces for working with audio recordings look like. If you use a digital recorder, you're either going to get something resembling the timeline at the top, or if you try to edit those recordings at all, it's going to look like the spectrograph at the bottom. And there are tools which will index, which you'll be very familiar with, I'm sure, which will index the recording to places when you write, but you still have to be writing constantly in order to get back to that audio. And even so, it's not that easy to manipulate and work with. And in fact, a lot of the conditions for audio recordings overcoming barriers, memory, sequential ordering problems, concentration, really rely on the fact that you need to be able to come to specific parts of your recording incredibly quickly, when at will, essentially. And this brings us to the reason why we made Audio Notetaker in kind of a roundabout way, because Sonocent identified that actually audio recordings could be the solution to solving many of the issues that students with disabilities have with note-taking. But the way we're utilizing or working with those audio recordings is just not useful. In fact, it's completely inaccessible. So what we sought to do was make a study tool, specifically a note-taking tool, which somehow made audio recordings accessible and useful and easy to work with. And this was our solution. Instead of displaying the audio recording on one long timeline, we would break it up phrase by phrase. Whenever there was a pause, we'd create a new phrase and display it on screen as these bars. And this provides a visual way of interacting with audio recordings that's broken up in a way that's very natural with the way we speak. It's essentially commas and periods, but for spoken language rather than written language. And this is what our tool looks like. So you'll notice that we have a space for audio on the right-hand side, and this is each of those phrases broken up into small bars. We have a space for textual notes in the middle, and we have a space to import PowerPoint slides on the left-hand side, and each of those is aligned. And also you'll notice that the audio bars, some of them are different colors, and this enables you to highlight audio much in the same way that you would highlight words in a textbook as you're reading to indicate different pieces of meaning. And on the right-hand side, we have color keys, so you can see that red is important and blue is review. And that's essentially what Sonocent is. It's a tool which makes audio recordings completely accessible and incorporates audio, text, and images into a single workspace where everything's aligned. But actually, the way that you use the software is so simple and also so powerful, and there's a lot you can do with it, which I can show you later. And this is how we solve the note-taking problem. So when we train students up on our software, we talk about 4 different stages for note-taking: capturing the information, then you annotate it with slides or text, color highlighting, and then after class you come home and you review. And that's when you re-listen to key parts, and that's when you summarize the information as notes, but you can do that in your own time. You don't have to do it while you're in class, and this actually means that students with a range of abilities are able to go through that process themselves. We do have some extra tools to help with that process as well. And then finally, engage. You've made your notes, but what now? And this is where you utilize those notes either to review before an exam or to use within an assignment. But it's an acknowledgement that note-taking is just one part of the study process, and it needs to fit into a much bigger picture as well. And because of this, we support a range of abilities, and it's an approach that really works. And this is some data from our 2015 user survey, but you can see that the software has a huge impact for the students who do use it, not only with the ability to take notes, but also with confidence and actually anxiety as well. So about 50% of our students say that they use the software in order to reduce anxiety and stress while studying. And I'm sure Darren will have much more to say about student feedback on the software and their experiences of using it. So without further ado, I think it'd be good to chat to Darren and find out about his impressions of the software and how he went about using the software at the University of Nevada, Reno. Okay, well, Darren, thanks for joining us, and thank you for your time. Just before we begin, would you like to introduce yourself and give everyone an idea of what your role is at University of Nevada, Reno?
Sure. I am the lead AT specialist here at the Disability Resource Center at the University of Nevada. We deal, student population right now is right at 21,000. We deal with about 1,500 self-identified students. And I stress self-identified because I'll touch back on that, something Dave said earlier. Our students range anywhere from people with motor difficulties to service veterans are coming back from wherever with traumatic brain injuries, amputations, whatever it may be, students with ADHD, or just testing disorders. We really see a very wide spectrum of students, and finding solutions to help all of them normally tends to be very difficult, but I'm happy to say with Audio Notetaker we found one that seems to fit probably 99% of the students we see.
And so before you started using Audio Notetaker, what did you use, what did you do for note-taking accommodations?
It was a strange mix of human note takers, which we found to be less than optimal. And we did move into using smart pens, but they also have some drawbacks that didn't lend them to everyone and the way they learn.
Sure. And okay, and when did you come across Sonocent, and what were your initial impressions of the software?
About a year and a half ago, one of my colleagues attended some kind of a webinar, and someone happened to mention it and kind of demoed it real quick. And she came back and said, hey, you might be interested in this. Now, I get those things from people all the time. And typically, whenever we look at a new technology here at Nevada, it's about a 6-month process from the time we take a look at it, we bring it in, play with it, beat it up, see what makes it tick, and then we'll find a small group of users to test it to see if they think it might be worthwhile. And finally, we'll hand it to a couple of students that we have selected and have them take a look at it, use it in class, beat it up, see what they think. Then we'll decide if we want to move it into the mix. It took all of about a week and a half for us to do that with Audio Notetaker. Within about half an hour of looking at it, I knew this was something very different that would help a lot of our students, and again, across that wide spectrum of disorders. We looked at it. We had it in students' hands within about a week, and it took those students about 3 days to come back and say, yeah, this is really great. Can I have this forever, please, now? It was a wonderful response. So we gingerly dipped our toe in the water and took 10 loan licenses, and they went quickly, very quickly. Strangely, we found that the users who liked it most were from our medical school. They run on a block scheduling system, and these students are in a classroom 8 to 10 hours a day with somebody yammering at them about all manner of things. So a system that would actually record, let them take notes, and then review again and again and condense down and distill the information was something that they absolutely loved. And we took a lot of what we learned there, and in last fall of 2014, we rolled it out to all of our students. And we had about 9 take us up on it, and 2 of those were still from the med school. We got the results back at the end of the semester, and they were phenomenal. Students actively went about massaging and manipulating their notes at a level they had never had before. And because of that, they were able to retain and comprehend at a level they've never had before. And that was very exciting for us.
Well, that's actually pretty exciting stuff to hear. And now that you've been using the software for a while and opened up the use to even more students, have you got any more feedback?
Oh, tons. After the first semester, we knew that we needed more licenses, so we went about, and I think we now have somewhere right around 30. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. I have about 500 smart pens in current use on campus, and every semester that number goes down, and the number of my Audio Notetaker licenses keeps going up. These students tell their friends. We have done some research, pulled the numbers, and the best we can tell is that a student that uses this and uses it the way we teach them to use it we'll see about a 3 grade level difference. Now, here at the university, a grade level is an A or an A minus or a B plus or a B. We actually count the pluses and minuses. So a 3 grade level bump would be the difference between a B to an A, a C to a B. It's amazing when you see these students that have struggled all their lives and they come in and they show us, they'll bring in their tests and they'll show us how they did. I'm in constant communication with one of my students. He's always telling me how great he's doing in class because of the audio note taker. And it's, part of it is just the great tool, and part of it is exactly the method that you laid out. It's very similar to what we have here at Nevada. Each of those 4 steps is critical to them retaining the information. As long as they follow it, we've seen amazing results. I've had one student tell me that it didn't help them much. And when I actually dug into it, I found out that they weren't really using it the way we told them. So we brought them back in, retrained them, and now they're a happy user.
And which of your students would you say can benefit from using Audio Note Taker? Or to flip that on its head, are there any student populations which you feel would not benefit from the software?
About the only group that tends not to do well with it, visually impaired users. It's a very visual interface, and they tend to just like sitting in class and listening. Our deaf and hard of hearing students tend not to really go for anything like this. They have another technology that they're much more happy with. But aside from those groups, everyone else seems to really enjoy it.
And has it been easy getting other members of staff on board?
Oh, absolutely. At first, anytime I roll out a piece of technology, the staff is interested but wary. How is this going to help my students? What students would this help? What's the audience for this? Well, how is that different than this technology? And when would I use one over the other? I hear that all the time. Once they actually started seeing it, and this summer I actually corralled them all in a room, locked the door, and fed them pizza while I trained them on how to use it. And I've actually got some of our staff that take classes, they're now using Audio Note Taker. They bought their own licenses. It's that kind of software. It really helps. And to be perfectly honest, I use it in my classes. Once you see it, once you understand how to use it, you really wonder how you ever took notes before. And I think that's the beauty of the product, is that it makes you see note-taking in a completely different way.
Thanks, Darren. I think you've said some incredibly generous things, and that's a wonderful testimony. I think what I'm probably going to do now is show the software, because I know I went over the concept rather quickly, and it may be good for people to get their heads around exactly how someone would use this to take notes. And then we'll come back to you and ask a few more questions about how you implemented the software and encouraged student adoption, and also how you feel it stacks up to other alternatives as well.
Sounds great.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to bring up Audio Note Taker now. I'm demonstrating the PC version. We do have a Mac version available as well. The Mac version does look slightly different to this. It's basically the update to bring it up to the same standard as the PC version is currently under development. So we're hoping to have that next year. Well, almost guaranteed to be next year, but you will have to wait a little bit longer for the Mac version to look like this. So when a student loads up the software, and then they'll be confronted with this home tab, and they can select a blank project in order to open up a new tab. And this is what the workspace looks like before a student has recorded anything. Now, a student can go in with their laptop and record straight into their laptop, or they can use one of our free app, which we designed for recording, capturing, and annotating, and I will talk about that after this demonstration. Or you can actually use any recording device and import the recordings in afterward. And some students do like to do that because it means they don't have to worry about doing anything in class, and they can spend a lot of time concentrating. although, as I'll explain, there's advantages for going through the annotation process while you're in class. So a student would go to class, they'd load up the software and hit record, which is in the top left-hand corner here, and then the software would start recording the professor's voice. And you'll notice as I'm speaking that every time I take a pause, the software will break up that speech into phrases. And that's the chunking which I referred to, or the breaking up the speech into bars, which makes using the audio within the software so much easier. So now when a student hears something important, all they need to do, they don't have to write down what that information was. All they need to do is press one button and it will start color highlighting the audio that color. And in this case, I press the number 1 on the keypad. On the right-hand side, we have a color key, and there are numbers alongside. 1 for important, 2 for review, 3 for task. And this is our way of making that process of coloring as easy as possible. The student doesn't have to think about where to click. All they need to do is press one button. You can, of course, click if you want to, if you're a competent mouse user, but we have added keyboard shortcuts for almost everything to make that process easy. And you can also go back and color things that have already been, because sometimes you don't know things are important straight away. And because we have this visual way of interacting with audio, that's actually very easy to do. The next thing you may want to do is break the recording up into sections and organize your audio recording. Now, most students these days, when they're in class, as long as it's not, say, a seminar or a discussion, they'll have slides which accompany their class. So one of the things we recommend is every time the slide changes, press enter, and you can start grouping the audio next to your slides. So all you need to do is import your slides. And you can do this before or after class. If you do it after, it will just put one slide next to each one of these sections. And if you do it beforehand, then when you press enter, it's just going to move the recording along to the next slide. The advantage of course, of having the slides beforehand, if you can arrange that, number 1, it gives students a chance to review the lecture content beforehand. And that can be really good, a really good study skill or study habit to get into in order to better understand and better synthesize the information when it's being presented to you in your lecture. The other reason is that when you press enter, you can follow along with the class and you always know where you are, and it does make this process slightly easier. You can also change the background color of these sections, and there are going to be times when you want to just color the whole thing. For example, if they're talking about a task, you may think this whole slide is related to the task, or perhaps for a student with ADHD, if they switch off and they suddenly realize, oh, I haven't been listening to anything this professor's been saying for this slide, they can just color the whole slide, say, I need to review this, and then they just come back and re-listen to this slide only. It's a really simple way of annotating or grouping big pieces of information. And then you can, of course, type your notes as well. All you need to do is start typing on the keypad, and the notes will go alongside. The student can do as much or as little as this as they want. But the whole beauty of the software is that you don't have to type your notes. You can basically do, if all you want to do is listen, then you can listen. If you want to type extensive notes, if you're able to do that, then you can do that too, and just have the audio as a backup. The software in many ways is a UDL tool because it enables students to work in a way which suits them, not only with choosing which medium, either audio or text or images and visual, but also whether they want to do it in class or whether they want to do it after class. It enables students, it's a tool which enables students to study in a way which suits them. And that's all you need to do in class. So you record, you color, you press enter when the slide changes, you type as much or as little as you want. And that's covering the capture and annotation portion of the process. And you can do the exact same actions on the phone app as well, the mobile app. And then the student would come and they would review the information. So they'd come back, they'd play, and that's the chunking which I referred to, or the breaking up the speech into bars, which makes, and you'll notice as I'm speaking that, and you come and play and listen to the bits that you coloured. And I'm just using the arrow keys here to hop from phrase to phrase. And this way of moving through audio is both really quick but also really intuitive, because every time you move, you're starting from the beginning of a phrase. It's a very natural place to begin listening to something. And you can also see sometimes there's a big gap. And I know this is going to be the start of probably maybe a different topic. So the visualization not only aids with navigation, but also giving you an indication of when the important stuff might come up. And then when the student listens back, that's when they synthesize the information and do their outlines. And we have the ability to have bullet points, change the colors, change the font. People can personalize those notes in whichever way suits them. And we also do have quite sophisticated audio cleanup technology as well. Up here on the toolbar, we've got lots of different options. But this area here relates to the playback. And we can go to audio cleanup and add suppress hiss and hum, or suppress typing and clicks. So if I was recording and I was typing on the keypad, then I can suppress those sounds. Likewise, if there's a background noise, a gentle murmuring in class, or maybe the sound of a projector, then I can suppress those sounds as well. It's also worth saying that by default, we adjust the volume of the recording. So often when you're recording in a larger room, the actual voice within it is going to be quite quiet. But what we do is we boost the sound of that voice to make it audible, regardless of the volume of the original recording. And it's worth noting that these bars are fully editable. So I might think, actually, this part I press should belong over here, and I can just drag and drop those bars. Or I might think, actually, all of this I don't need anymore, and I can delete it. And this may not be super useful for note-taking in class, because you may assume that you want as much information as possible. But if you're using the software to capture your own ideas, maybe you're brainstorming or planning for an assignment, and you just want to talk into the software and capture your ideas in a very natural way, then the ability to move things around and delete them actually makes that process really easy. The other thing to say is that just this level of interactivity is turning listening from a very passive process into an active one. I've had people talk about the gamification of learning, and I wouldn't say that this was really a game per se, but it's interactive and it's creative in a way that makes engaging with the information actually a rather enjoyable and active process, and it feels a bit less like studying, just because you do have that control. So you come back, you listen, you can use the audio cleanup, and if you go through and you type up your notes, and maybe you review and you realize a few more bits were important than perhaps you initially marked in class, you can then extract those colors and audio into a new project. And this is going to be the notes that you're then going to review before an exam. The other thing you could do, say you have a print disability, or say you just don't work well with text, you're an auditory learner. There's no reason why you have to write down your notes. The information was given to you orally. Why not play back, listen to the key points, and then record yourself doing a summary? And you can say, well, in this slide, the key points were X, Y, Z. Stop, re-listen to another part, record a bit more. And then when you go to extract, you can just extract the summaries into a new project. And this is a way of creating a summary or a revision tool that doesn't require any writing if you don't want to write. So the tool is really, if you are just aware of these study techniques, students of many different learning styles, many different abilities can use the software in order to engage with the information, to synthesize it, and create tools which resources which are going to be really useful later before an exam. I don't want to overload you with loads of information at the moment. We have covered capture, annotate, review. Final one is engage. We've got a couple of tools here to help with that process, so you can export your recording in different formats. One of the interesting things as well is we do have text-to-speech and also speech-to-text options within the software. The text-to-speech is a button.
Synthesize the information.
That's a British voice because I'm using a British operating system, but if we basically just use the Windows text-to-speech engine. But that can be really useful for students if they want to read out not only their own notes, but perhaps notes they've copied and pasted in, or even the PowerPoint presentation. So one thing I didn't mention is these controls at the bottom will show and hide the different panes. So I can hide the images if I don't think I need it. And I can also show two different text panes. These two columns are really useful for a number of reasons. Number one could be because the student really loves the Cornell method of note-taking, where you've got, you split your page of notes into columns, and then on the left-hand column, you put questions or single words which are supposed to jog your memory about the content that's within it. Now you can do the same technique with the software, showing and hiding different panes when you come to review. Another thing you can do is you can copy the text from your slides. And in fact, you can import PDF documents and PowerPoint into this area, and you can extract the text from the PDF document as well, as long as it's accessible. And then I can, of course, get the software to read out this text as well. Finally, what I could do is I can send the speech to the audio pane. So when I press that button, it created chunks out of the text, and I can listen back to that just like I would listen to my lecture.
Ethics of T. Economics. Module, Development Economics. Development. The Ethics of T. Economics. Module.
And we also have a scribe button. So you do actually have to have Dragon Naturally Speaking installed on your machine. So if you are a Dragon user and you use Dragon to compose your assignments, then you can use audio note-taking in order to do the editing process, and then press the scribe button, which will load up your Dragon profile, and then have it transcribe that information right at the end. You can also get it to transcribe those summaries if you've dictated them. But it does give the opportunity to work with text as speech and also speech as text if you are a Dragon user. So hopefully that will have given you an overview of the software. I probably went into a little bit too much detail, but hopefully it's very easy to see that it's both simple to use in its basic form, but also there's lots of study techniques which can be applied to this, both using text and using audio in order to really get a lot of benefit from the software. And we do have an app. It's called Sonocent Recorder. It's available for iOS and Android, so you can use it on your iPad, iPhone, or any Android device. And this will enable you to record and annotate. So you can type text, you can color, you can break it up into sections. You can also take photos as well with the app. And that's just available to download for free from the Google Play Store or the App Store. The reason it's free is you do have to transfer your recordings from the app to the software in order to be able to go through the review and engage process as well. Okay, so I'm going to bring Darren back on just to ask him a few more questions now that I've actually demonstrated the tool. And we do have a couple of questions here as well from the audience members, which I'll get to in a minute. So Darren, I've gone over the software pretty quickly. How easy was it for you to implement the software, encourage student adoption, and also train students?
Well, big question there. It was actually fairly simple. Once we understood how the software could be used and used best by our students, it led itself automatically to the 4 steps you looked at, care. And we implement it just a little differently here. We tell the students, use it in class, sit back, pay attention, let it record. Don't worry about taking notes so much. You can go back and do that later. When they get home, that's when we have them do the annotation. That's when they make their notes. That's when they extract their text. And it's really that reference pane that we use to have them extract text and then annotate those slides and make any notes. The text field we use later, whenever they sit down and they start to review, and that's when they're going to start highlighting the blocks of text, or of audio rather, and figuring out what is what. And we teach them the Cornell Notes method, so this is when they're starting to go back through and write their test questions for themselves, picking up anything that they might have missed before. In the final step, we have them distill all of that information down to one file that is just what they need to learn, and that's what they're going to use to review the text for the class, the audio for the class, whatever it may be. And we found that if they follow these steps, they'll see it a minimum of 3 times, which is what they need for retention. And really, they'll see it a 4th time if they go back through and study it properly. What did it take to get students to do this? A big stick. The way we roll the product out is a little bit different than anything else we do. We have a 90-minute training session. The first 30 minutes of that session is us showing, much like you did, Dave, what it does, how it does it, the bells and whistles, and then we ask a question. Do you still want the product? And I have never had a student say no. The next 30 minutes we go through and we teach them the process, how it's going to be done. And for the last 30 minutes, that's when we're taking questions, we're installing the software on their machines, and we're getting them ready to play with it. And the software that we install on their machines is the 30-day evaluation copy. It's fully loaded, does everything it needs to, but at the end of 30 days, or just before, we have the students come back and show us how they've been using it as kind of a checkpoint. We make sure that they're actually using it, for one. Secondly, that they're using it in the way that they're supposed to. And 3, are they getting anything out of it? That's really the big one. And again, I've only had one student in the last year and a half that said, no, not really. But refreshing them on the product again and the steps we showed them, then they suddenly saw the light at the end of the tunnel. We will normally loan out a license until the end of a semester, and at the end of the semester they have to call and ask for it again. We'll renew it. They don't have to come in. It's easy as pie. But this way we know that the students are actually using it. And so far, all 25 of our licenses are now in full use. So it's been a road, a little bit of a process, but students love it. They take to it right away.
Yeah, Darren, 90 minutes may seem like quite a long time to invest in training a student, and depending on the resources at hand, it may be completely impractical. Would you say 90 minutes is essential for any student to use the software, or do you feel that you're particularly thorough?
No, I think we're pretty thorough. We've done this class now probably 80 times, and whenever we do the training, it's normally on a weekend. We come in on Saturdays. We'll sit down for an hour and a half, and we'll normally have anywhere between 8 and 12 students in a room. And there are 3 of us actually teaching the class at the same time. So the students have one person that they're listening to, 2 people that they can ask questions of that will install software that will help them out. And we found that this is the best way. We've tried doing it one-on-one. That didn't do it. We have tried doing it in shorter amounts, 3 30-minute sessions. That didn't work out real well because it kind of left the students hanging. But the 90 minutes works out pretty well for us. Of course, your mileage may vary.
Sure. It's probably worth saying as well, we do have quite a lot of resources built into the software to help students. And I've just brought up here our video section. So on the Home Help tab, if you go down to video, at the moment we've got 6 videos, 1 explaining what the software is, and then 4 going through capture, annotate, review, and engage. So whether these videos are used for training or used as a review process, they are there for students. And we also have an interactive tutorial as well. Darren, we're getting a couple of questions on the loan license. Do you want to explain that in a bit more detail?
Absolutely. It's possibly my favorite part of Audio Notetaker, at least for us. In the past, let's say that we've had a product for taking notes that we loan to a student. We have to bring them in. We have to have them sign paperwork. They take it. Sometimes they bring it back. Sometimes they bring it back in multiple pieces. Sometimes they just disappear. It makes a real headache, especially at the end of a semester. In fact, today is one of the days that we're having students bring a lot of that equipment back. I don't have that problem with a loan license. We have currently 25 loan licenses, which means that I can loan the software out to 25 people at a time. At the end of a certain amount of time, that license comes right back to me. They still have the ability to review any files that they've created using Audio Notetaker, but they can't create any new ones. If they want to create new ones, then they have to come back and ask me to extend their loan. And typically we will extend it 1 semester at a time. We made the mistake of doing it for a year one time, and the student left about 2 months in. Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. So we're down to 1 semester, student uses it, not a problem. And when they're done, it comes right back home.
Brilliant. And how do you think Audio Notetaker stacks up against the other note-taking accommodations you've offered?
Okay. Against human note takers, there's just no question. We're never going to get rid of human note takers. There is a certain population that requires them. But we're down now to, I believe, 12 on campus, and next semester I think that goes down to 4. But some of the problems we've had with them, they don't show up, or the student doesn't show up and we wind up paying them anyway. It's inconsistent, and one of the questions we still have never answered is how can someone take notes and then expect somebody of a different learning style to understand those notes and get anything from them? That initial question is what led us to things like smart pens. And again, smart pens, the headache is on the management, the back end, chasing someone down to get them back. They break down constantly. The lifespan that we found is about 2 years. If we're lucky, we might get 3 years out of a particular pen. Most of them we have a problem with around 2 years. And it's now starting to become more and more of a pain to get warranty assistance with them. And we've tried all sorts of types, so it's kind of across the board for us. Audio Notetaker stacks up beautifully against them. Again, we don't have the back-end headache of chasing people down to get it back. The students seem to love it. It works for the same population that the smart pens did. And initially some of the staff said, well, what if I have students that like to write their own notes? And really it's not a problem. We have a computer lab here in the Disability Resource Center. They can come in, they can scan their notes and bring them right into Audio Notetaker just like they were used to with a smart pen. You're not losing anything by moving to Audio Notetaker. You're actually gaining a whole bunch of things. And one of the things, and I know you didn't have a lot of time to touch on it, one of our favorite things for our online classes and our distance learning classes is the fact that you can change your recording input from the speakers and microphone on the laptop to what's coming over the speakers. So if you've got a distance learning class, you can capture both sides of the conversation, what the student's saying and what the teacher's saying. And it's great for our students to be able to go back and review. Here's Dave showing it right now. It's very simple. This is also useful if you've got students that want to bring in information from the web. So we've got professors that will use videos that are up on YouTube. Well, the student can now go out to YouTube and bring in the audio from that right into Audio Notetaker. It's brilliant. Oh, here's another one of my favorite tools, the ability to capture screen images. And this works really well. Again, if you've got students that use things like ebooks, and a lot of our classes are going towards e-textbooks, you can now bring in a full page of information from that textbook right into what they're going to be studying. And I've actually got a couple of students where what they record in class is about 10% of what they actually wind up with in their files because they go back in and annotate like crazy. And they're doing very well with the software. You touched a little bit about the gamification of learning. I mean, if you can get their attention, you can get them to use it, whatever it takes. Call it whatever you like, but our students love it.
And what's the student feedback like, especially in relation to other accommodations if they've had them in the past?
The students that we've moved over from the smart pens love it. I mean, there's just, once they see it and they understand all that it can do, there's really no going back. One student wanted to know if he could use them both at the same time. We said no, and we gave him a choice. He took the Audio Notetaker. But as I said, we have all 25 licenses loaned out at any given time.
And in terms of affordability, do you feel that the software is expensive? Has the software saved you any money?
Oh, absolutely. When we look at what it cost us to have the smart pens or a human note taker, the Audio Notetaker licenses are infinitely more affordable than having those, and the fact that once we buy the license, we keep that license. We don't have to worry about a student walking off with it. We don't have to worry about anything. Once we pay the price, it's done. Very simple.
Sure, and I guess I should take this opportunity just to go over our pricing. Not that this is supposed to be too promotional, but I think it's always useful to have a ballpark figure for what something like this could cost. We do sell single user licenses, which are $85 for a year or $250 for a lifetime license. But what colleges buy are the loan license bundles, which Darren referred to earlier, and these are bundles of licenses which you can lend out over and over again and manage through a web control panel. And those are sold on a subscription basis. Basically, the more years you buy up front, the cheaper it gets. But you're looking at about $4,800 for 100 licenses for a year, or $10,000 for 3 years. So it could save you money compared to note takers, depending on how much you spend on human note takers, if anything at all. Okay, we're right on the hour at the moment, so I'm just gonna see if there are any other questions that people have asked that we haven't covered yet in the presentation. So we just had a question about using Dragon to transcribe the lecturer's speech. As we know, Dragon is a dictation program and does require training on a person's voice. We actually resisted adding the feature, the Dragon integration, to Audio Notetaker for a long time. We already have a lot of people assume that Audio Notetaker means that the software will simply convert all audio into text, which is not what the software was designed to do at all. And we thought that adding Dragon or speech recognition into the software would further propagate that misunderstanding. But we did know that students were using the software for composing essays, for brainstorming, for creating summaries, and we thought for those students it's going to be such a useful feature, so we added it in. Which brings me to answering the question. The feature's not there to transcribe the lecturer's voice. Even if it could transcribe the lecturer's voice perfectly, you'd still wind up with about 10,000 words of unformatted text because there's no way of doing punctuation at all. And actually, that's probably not going to be very useful for a student. There's a reason that we go to lectures rather than just read textbooks all day, and that's because there's a lot of value to be had in a spoken explanation. And also there's a lot more information that's carried with speech as well. So at the moment, we train students to use the Dragon integration simply to transcribe their own dictated summaries or their own brainstorm sessions or their own compositions. And that is compatible with Dragon 12, 13, and 14 professional and premium editions. Not home, unfortunately, but that's not our fault. That's Dragon's fault. They block us from accessing the API. So we have another question for Darren here. So Darren, do you teach online courses in which you implement this software?
The course themselves, no. Right now, we've rolled this out to students enrolled with the DRC. We're currently working on getting this rolled out across our campus, and we have some other problems other than just licensing for that. Here in Nevada, it's actually illegal to record a lecture unless there's special permission given, so we're working with Faculty Senate to get around that problem. But we do have students, individual students, that will use it if they're taking an online course. We've also got a movement on campus. A lot of our professors are moving towards something called a flipped classroom, which is where the student actually listens to the lecture and reads the book on their own time. When they come to class is when they're working on problems and homework and things like that, where they can interact directly with the professor. And some of the professors are finding value in taking their entire lecture, all their slides, everything else, creating an audio note-taker presentation and pushing it out to their flipped classrooms. I'm hoping that answered the question.
Okay. Thanks for that, Darren. We do have a question here which may be difficult to demonstrate. So the question is, can we show adding a PDF or a PowerPoint to a project that has been recorded but which has not been divided into sections? That actually may be quite difficult for us to demonstrate. For that sort of thing, we'd be happy to go through. It's probably better if we organize another time for that. We are going to be sending up a follow-up email to this presentation with a link to a recording of the software. It will also have a link for a button where you can basically book or arrange a time for us to give you a call back. If you are interested in having a member of Sonocent talk to you about what you're doing at your college and whether implementing Sonocent could actually aid you. And if you go through that process, then we'll of course be able to show using the software in that way as well as answer any questions which we haven't addressed in today's presentation. We're just over time, so I'm just going to see if we've got one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up. So we have another question on the transfer process between the mobile apps and the desktop software. You do have a number of options. You have one option which is a Wi-Fi transfer. Basically, if both devices, both your laptop and your mobile device, are on the same wireless network, then you can just transfer the files across that network. That does not work on campus that well because they block that sort of transfer for basically security reasons, but at home it works really well. You can also, however, use Dropbox, Google Drive, any file cloud-based file sharing service in order to basically sync the files to your computer. That is something I'm unable to demonstrate within this presentation, but something that we do have videos for online, and something that we could also demo if you'd like us to. So do get in touch regarding that. And then the final question is regarding upgrades. We don't charge for upgrades, and the subscription cost as well does cover support, maintenance, and all upgrades as well. So that's probably worth clarifying as well at this point. Darren also mentioned a free trial. We do have a 30-day free trial available from our website, which anyone can download. And Darren very wisely gets his students to do that for 30 days before even committing to giving them a loan license. So there is a way of testing out the software with students to see if it's something that will work with them without actually having any commitment at all. So thank you all for attending the webinar. Darren, do you have any closing words before we wrap up?
Oh, wow, I think we hit quite a bit on in the 1 hour. Nothing really comes to mind, Dave. It's a great package. I know our students get a lot out of it, and I hope that the students of the people attending this get a lot out of it as well.
Darren, we do have just one more question. Would you mind if people contacted you in the future if they had any questions, any further questions?
I have no problem with that at all. I think the more we all talk as a community, the better a job we're going to do for our students.
Fantastic. That's really kind of you as well. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you for your time, Darren. We will be sending up a follow-up email tomorrow, which will include a lot more information. And of course, if you've got any questions, do contact us at Sonocent. You can do that through the website, or we do have an email address, hello@sonocent.com. And we also do have lots of resources online as well. So if you go to www.sonocent.com/independent-study, that's going to be a page full of video resources, case studies from different colleges, frequently asked questions, and also white papers, including the user survey, which I referred to before. So we'll include that link in the email as well, so don't worry if you don't capture it now. Otherwise, thank you for your time attending, and thanks again to Darren for being such a wonderful co-host here, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.